Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. I'm Bradley Braddock Brady. Apparently my mom loved alliteration, known as Brad to all my friends and colleagues, as well as to any man who doesn't think he can beat the shit out of me. The only facts relevant to this story are that in my senior year of high school, I was the state light heavyweight wrestling champion and went to college on a wrestling scholarship. However, in my freshman year at State University, I grew 10 centimeters and gained 11 kilograms, so I no longer had a real opportunity to fight in the light heavyweight division in college. The maximum weight in the light heavyweight division in college is 90 kilograms, which is only 1.5 kilograms more than in high school. I even had problems gaining weight in high school when I was naturally 11 kilograms lighter. At 190 centimeters tall and 105 kilograms in college, I was the lightest heavyweight in the area. After 8 to 12 years of heavyweight wrestling, I quit wrestling and graduated from business school with honors, as well as took basic courses in civil engineering, an unusual combination. Now I am the same height as I was in college, and I work as a construction supervisor at large construction sites. I enjoy doing physical labor in addition to brain work, and I find it both intimidating and morale-boosting when virtually all of my male colleagues know that I am stronger than almost all of them and am not afraid to get my hands dirty. At the beginning of this story, Melissa Minton was my wife for 5 years. We got married a year after graduating from college. She didn't take my last name when we got married, which didn't really matter to me. Melissa is a big, strong-willed, independent, smart, successful woman who is damn good and knows it. She works as a high-level financial analyst. James "Jimmy" Walters was my best friend at school, and he was my age. In his senior year, he finished second in the state in wrestling at 75 kilograms. He enrolled in a small college on a wrestling scholarship, wrestled there for all 4 years, and received a diploma in business administration. We remained close, despite the fact that we studied at different colleges, texting daily, calling on the phone weekly, and constantly doing something together on vacation. Even after we graduated from high school, even though I moved from our hometown to a city 600 kilometers away, we talked weekly and met, often with our wives after we both got married, at least twice a year. Jimmy left the family business about a year after his marriage, much to their dismay, and began working as a seller of high-tech products, eventually serving the territory of 4 states. Charlene Walters, née Simpson, had been Jimmy's wife for about 3 years at the time this story began. Charlene is petite, kind, pretty, smart, and slim, but in character she is the complete opposite of Melissa. She is unsure of herself, does not realize how attractive she is, and has a weak will. She worked as a cashier at a bank. The relationship between the main characters and their families is complicated. I've always hated Jimmy's family. At school, his 2 older brothers, Billy and Bobby, their family obviously likes nicknames ending in and bullied everyone they could. Fortunately, they only had about 75 kilograms, so they couldn't bully everyone, and they didn't even try to bully me, because at 14 I was bigger than them. Jimmy's father, Jake, is a complete jerk, and his mother, Jean, is probably the meanest woman I've ever met. I've never been able to understand how a really sweet, considerate, endearing, popular, smart guy like Jimmy could have been born into such a bunch of jerks. I always wondered how Charlene could live with them as with her relatives. From my conversations with Jimmy, it became clear to me that he stopped working in the family business because he was tired of his family, and especially the way they treated Charlene. Melissa seemed to like Jimmy, or at least she didn't dislike him, and although she was polite to Charlene, she didn't have any respect for her because she was too weak for her, given Melissa's strong character. Melissa was close to her family, especially her father, who was a successful businessman in the city where we lived. Her father respected me, but he never really loved me because I stood up to him and couldn't stand the shit he seemed to like to dump on everyone except Melissa. Charlene didn't have a local family, and her parents are just as averse to confrontation as she is. I really liked Charlene from the moment I met her, and it seems like she really liked me. Jimmy has told me several times that he is happy that his best longtime friend and his wife get along so well. I fell in love with Melissa not only because of her looks, but also because she is a strong, independent person. As a child, I always liked strong women, or at least I thought I did. However, as our family life developed, I discovered that this special strong-willed woman, I believe this does not apply to everyone or even most. Put herself first, then her job, and then me. That she had little patience for people who, in her opinion, did not meet her standards. She also wasn't as compliant with the frequency of bed contact as I would have liked, but if I ever turned her down, I would have to pay dearly. Being busy with work, trying to confront Melissa as often as possible, and dragging her into bed, and generally being a balanced guy, I never seriously wondered how happy I was in life. Then one amazing story changed that. On Thursday, around 4:30 p.m., I got a call on my cell phone at work. I only answered because the caller ID said it was from Jimmy's landline. But it wasn't Jimmy, it was Charlene's mother. "Hi, Brad." A voice I didn't immediately recognize said in my earpiece. "Yes, it's Brad. Who is it?" I replied. This is Cindy Simpson, Charlene's mom. We've met once or twice," followed by this. "Hi, Cindy, I remember you," I replied politely, trying to figure out why she needed to call me, especially from Jimmy's landline. "Brad, I have some bad news. Jimmy died in a car accident in another state last night after visiting a client. Charlene finds it very difficult to control herself, and she is afraid of her husband's relatives. Could you, come to visit and help Charlene put everything in order to fulfill Jimmy's will?" Cindy asked hesitantly. I was suddenly overcome by a feeling of primitive shock. In fact, it made me exhale quickly because I had never experienced anything like this before. Clarity returned to me when Cindy asked, Are you still here, Brad?" "Yes, I'm sorry, Cindy. I was just thinking about how fast I could get there." "Tell Charlene I'll be there tomorrow afternoon at the latest," I said. "Thank you very much, Brad." "Charlene will be very happy," Cindy replied, after which we both broke off the conversation. I suddenly found such clarity in my thoughts as I had never had before. I immediately sounded the horn at the construction site, summoning all the employees, and as soon as they all gathered 15 minutes later, I laid everything out in front of them. Due to family troubles, I will most likely leave for the next week or so. Jason is in charge. I'm telling him right now, in front of you guys and girls, that when I get back, he has to report to me any careless behavior, any unwillingness to cooperate, and any attitude. I can guarantee you that if I get a message about anyone, your ass will be in danger. We have a realistic schedule on our desktop for what needs to be completed in the next 10 days. And if there is no hurricane or earthquake, you'd better do it when I get back. Any questions?" I snapped. I walked around the team of 50 people, looking everyone in the eye, and repeated, "Have questions," 5 or 6 times. Everyone shook their heads negatively. "If you're all good boys and girls, I'll have pizza and beer on my bill when I get back. The work is finished for today. Get ready," I said, turned around and left. On the way home, I called the owner of the construction company. He was often prickly and liked to pose. However, basically, he was a decent guy when it came to it. I was the only one in the company who called him by his first name. As soon as his secretary got through to him, I got straight to the point. "Tom, I have urgent business to attend to, and I will be away from a week to 10 days. We are at a good stage of the project, and I made it clear to Jason and the whole team that they will work on schedule until I return, or they will have to pay a lot. Isn't this a bad time for a project?" Tom asked. "Actually, it's a good time. We are 13 days ahead of the real schedule, the schedule that I have on the bulletin board. I made up myself so that there would be room for maneuver. Besides, it's really important to me," I replied. "Well, anyway," he began. "Tom, stop it. I'm not asking for your permission. You're a big boss, but I've been a model employee, and you need me. I'm only calling you to tell you what's going on. You have only one way out, to say, 'I hope you succeed,' or fire me," I retorted, probably a little louder and sharper than I intended. After about 10 seconds, Tom said, "I hope you do well, Brad, and let me know when you get back. I will be there, and I'll be in touch with Jason on the phone every morning. So if you need to contact me, tell him and I'll call you back." That's the end of the conversation. Melissa didn't really like the situation when I told her about it. After my suitcase was packed and my plane ticket was booked the next morning when she returned home from work, she started telling me off, saying something about Charlene needing to have the courage to solve her own problems, which pissed me off like hell. I snapped back. "Why the hell did you start criticizing Charlene when her husband just died? And when you don't know Jimmy's family like I do, I'm leaving and I'll stay as long as it takes. If you don't like it, get over it. I growled. Although I've had to put Melissa in her place more than once in the past, I've never done it so decisively. She wisely stepped back. Good, good. Don't pile up your underpants, was her gentle reply. I know how much Jimmy meant to you, and that you want to do the right thing by him. I can handle it. My approach immediately softened. Thanks, I appreciate it, I replied. Let's have dinner at Charlie's, her favorite casual restaurant, which she knew I tolerated only because she liked it. Of course, she was in charge, but as I said before, when she was like that, she tried her best to please me, so I didn't complain. When I got to Charlene's house in my rented car around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the next day everything turned out to be worse than I thought. Cindy was in some shock, and Charlene was crying not only because of Jimmy's untimely death, but also because his bully brothers Billy and Bobby were there, who blamed her for his death because he was traveling for a job that she wanted him to get, and from. Because of this, he had to leave the family business. They demanded that she leave, so that she would show them a copy of the will when they returned that evening. They even touched her with their hands. I held Charlene in my arms until she cried her eyes out, assuring her and Cindy that I would take care of everything, and they had nothing to fear from the Walters family. As soon as Charlene went to take a nap she hadn't slept all night, I talked to Cindy and assured her that I had everything under control and she could go home to her critically ill husband, as if Jimmy's death wasn't enough. Cindy's husband, Charlene's father, has just been diagnosed with cancer, although it was noticed at an early stage. She thanked me warmly and left. Charlene got up around 5 o'clock in the evening. By that time, I had looked through all of Jimmy's papers and was glad that I had become a co-executor of his will with Charlene. Obviously, Jimmy realized that she would need his help. I was also glad that his company had issued him a $1 million key employee life insurance policy payable to them and a $750,000 life insurance policy payable to Charlene. After I fed Charlene, she told me more details about the first meeting with the Walters jerks. I assured her that there would be no problems when they returned, and changed into hiking boots, loose trousers, and a tight-fitting shirt, and pulled on thick gloves. Why are you dressed like that? Charlene asked, somewhat puzzled. You'll see, I smiled. By the way, keep your iPhone ready. If the Walters come back, I want you to take a video of what's going to happen. Charlene and I were going through some papers when the Walters broke into the house around 6 p.m. It didn't even knock. The whole family was there, Billy, Bobby, Jake, and Jean. I straightened up to my full height, clenched my fists and growled, "What the fuck are you assholes doing here? And invading someone else's territory without even bothering to knock." They were a little taken aback, but since they were together, Billy showed some bravado and said, "It's none of your business, Brad. Fuck off. We need to see Jimmy's papers." "You're the one who's going to fuck off, Billy. Charlene and I are co-executors of Jimmy's will, and we don't need your help. I'm telling you for the second and last time. Get the fuck out of here," I growled. "We're not leaving until we get what we want," said the energetic Bobby, quickly approaching me and pushing me aside, or at least trying to do so. As soon as he made the first contact, I elbowed him in the chin. It was probably the hardest blow I've ever dealt anyone in my life. By the time he hit the floor, he was unconscious. Billy swung stupidly, and I blocked his pathetic blow, grabbed his arm, stepped over it, and broke it at the elbow. When Billy fell to his knees, screaming in pain, I turned to Jake and Jean. "Get your stupid kids out of here in a minute, or I'll throw you out. I won't stand on ceremony with you." They obviously got into the arguments, because I know that evil Jean wanted to say something, but held her tongue. She helped Billy out, and Jake dragged Bobby until he woke up, and then helped him get up and get out. When I turned to look at Charlene, she was pale as a sheet, but, as instructed, she was holding her iPhone in her hand. Obviously, she recorded the entire incident. However, after the door closed, a smile appeared on her face for the first time during the visit, and she said, "Thank you, Brad," and hugged me. About half an hour later, there was a knock on the door. I opened it. They were two of the best police officers in our city, a man and a woman. I knew the male cop, Roland Hooper, well from high school. He was the defensive star of our football team, the all-state quarterback, and a year older than me. I was a mediocre midfielder, but playing with Roland, I looked my best. However, when Roland graduated, I was given another one, and his replacement turned out to be as mediocre as me. "Hi, Brad. It's been a long time," he greeted me in his deep baritone voice. "Roland," I grinned. "You're just a sight," I replied, and we hugged like men. "You look like you've lost weight since we were in high school," I giggled. "Yeah, I don't need to be 130 kilograms in this job. I've got 110 kilograms left in me, and I've never felt better," he chuckled back. "You look bigger than you did in high school." "Yes, I grew 10 centimeters in college." We chatted for a few more minutes, then he introduced me to his partner. "Brad, this is my partner, Corporal Judy Getty," he said. "Nice to meet you," Judy and I said to each other, shaking hands. She had a manly grip. She was a pretty girl. She looked great in a police uniform, but, no doubt, she was also strong. "I hope Roland treats you well," I chuckled. "If it's not, I'll kick his ass," she replied with a grin, causing Roland to laugh out loud. I didn't know anyone who could kick Roland's ass. "Look, Brad, we're not here for small talk. We're here because the Walters insist on filing an assault complaint against you. So I want to listen to you." "I need to do my job," Roland said. "Seriously now?" "Of course, do it. Come in, Roland and Judy," I said, opening the door. I introduced them to Charlene, asked her to tell me about the first meeting with Billy and Bobby, and then told them in detail what happened. Charlene confirmed it, and then I showed them the video from her iPhone. "You know what bullies Billy and Bobby were in high school? And apart from the fact that they both gained 11 kilograms of ugly fat, they haven't changed a bit," I told Roland. This caused him to laugh out loud again. Charlene emailed the video to Judy, and as they were leaving, Roland said to me, "I'll make sure the sergeant tells them they have to stay away from Charlene, period. I can assure you that no assault charges will be filed unless you want to file them yourself." "Thank you, Roland. I've had enough of their humiliation. I don't need to make my own accusations," I replied, giving him another manly hug and said, "Nice to meet you, Judy, and good luck holding the best defense in the history of the state." As they left, to another rolling laugh from Roland and Judy. While Roland and Judy were at her house, Charlene was fine, but as soon as they left, she broke down again. I hugged her while we talked, mostly about how good a time we had with Jimmy. Before we knew it, it was about 11 p.m., and her eyelids were heavy. "Charlene, I think you need to get some sleep." Good. But Brad, I want to ask you a big favor. Will you sleep with me tonight? I just can't to be one," she blurted out before she finally burst into tears. It wasn't really what I wanted, but I was really afraid for her mental health and thought it was better than going to the doctor or the emergency room if she had a nervous breakdown. We showered in different bathrooms, and I put on a clean t-shirt and boxers to sleep in because I don't even have pajamas, so I couldn't take them with me. Unfortunately, I caught a glimpse of Charlene's body as she was putting on her old nightgown in the master bathroom. Charlene always dressed conservatively, and I've never even seen her in a one-piece swimsuit. Although I thought she had a beautiful body, I wasn't sure until I caught a glimpse of it. Her body was more than beautiful, it was impressive. When we snuggled up in bed, Charlene's head was on my shoulder, and she muttered, "Thank you so much for coming, Brad. Jimmy said that if anything happens to him, you'll take care of me, and I'm very, very grateful to you." "I'm happy to help, and I'll take good care of you," I muttered back. A strange feeling came over me. I felt like a member of the Justice League, protecting the world from evil, and I felt more caring for Charlene than I had ever felt before in my life. I was very glad when, less than a minute later, Charlene began to snore softly. She must have been really exhausted emotionally and physically. I must have, too, because that was the last thing I thought about until 8 a.m. the next day. I tried to get out of bed without waking Charlene, but she woke up, smiled at me, and said, "Thanks, Brad. I've had a really good night's sleep, and it's only because of your love." "Love?" I thought. I didn't answer, but I kissed her on the forehead. The next day was busy. We had to go to the airport to pick up Jimmy's body. I did not allow Charlene to identify the body. Although there was no doubt that it was him, the medical examiner still needed confirmation. I was glad I didn't let that happen. Jimmy was badly disfigured in an accident, but it was clear that it was him. We spent the rest of the day preparing for his cremation, according to his will, and turning his ashes into a diamond in memory of Charlene, as well as preliminary preparations for a festive service on the occasion of his death, also according to his will. I made sure Charlene ate properly during the day, put her down for an hour to take a nap while I made some preparations, and we both took phone calls and house calls from Jimmy's many friends and well-wishers. While Charlene was napping, I called Jean Walters, Jimmy's mom. "Jean, this is Brad. I need to talk to you about Jimmy's service," I began, before she said sarcastically, "We are his family, and we are going to organize a service." "Jean, figure it out, damn it," I shouted into the phone. "According to his will, Charlene and I are in charge here, not you bunch of jerks. I'm calling to do you the courtesy of telling you when and where the funeral service will take place. You have nothing to say about this. You and your pack of jackalls will behave respectfully when you come, or you will be thrown out. I'll have security there. Am I making myself clear?" The phone was silent for several seconds. Having just seen one of the sons lose consciousness and the other's arm was broken, she obviously did not want to contact me. "Okay, I understand," she replied in the mildest tone I've ever heard her use. I told her when and where. He said that one of the family members could speak out if he wanted, but it was better that there was no sarcasm towards anyone in the conversation. Incredibly, she thanked me and said she would give a little speech, if you and Charlene don't mind. I told her that it would be so, and informed her that I would email her the draft agenda. Received her email address and disconnected. I tried to call Melissa twice unsuccessfully, but left her detailed messages. Of course, as I promised Tom, I called Jason every morning and everything went smoothly. Although Charlene felt fine during the day, she lost her composure around 10 p.m. After I comforted her for about an hour, she asked me to sleep with her again. We did the same procedure as the night before, and I cursed myself again for glancing at her body just before she went to bed. And once again, it was like we were turned off, emotionally and physically exhausted. Once again, I was overcome by that feeling of security towards Charlene that had gripped me just before I fell asleep. However, that night was not the same as the previous one. I woke up in the middle of the night from a very pleasant dream, but it wasn't a dream. There was a dim light next to the bed, and when I looked down to where the pleasure was coming from, I saw Charlene. Before she pulled away from me, she stopped, clung to me, and said with tears in her eyes, "Brad, I need to be loved so desperately. I'm drowning and I can't handle my feelings. Please make love to me." With that, she rolled onto her back and spread her legs. I didn't have a conscious thought, just a reaction, when I took off my t-shirt and finished taking off my half-removed boxers. The look she gave me when I lay on top of her and entered her was amazing. "Please be gentle," she murmured. "Take good care of me." I tried to be gentle, but I didn't quite succeed. As we lay side by side, I was overcome by a feeling of euphoria such as I had never experienced before. It's like I just saved the world from demons, when in fact I cheated on Melissa for the first time in my life. However, the realization of my betrayal was fleeting when Charlene, with tears in her eyes, gently stroked my cheek and whispered, "Thanks, Brad. You have no idea how much I needed it. Please don't feel any guilt or resent me. Please do whatever you want with me. I'm yours, and you can do whatever you want with me." This short speech almost confused me. Then she buried her face in my shoulder. My mind was in a mess that day. I finally got through to Melissa and hoped it didn't sound too guilty. When I spoke to her, there was a strange note in her voice that I couldn't identify, although she seemed unusually sweet. After Charlene and I had worked most of the morning, arranging services, contacting Jimmy's life insurance companies, and receiving well-wishers, it became obvious that she was tired and needed a nap. Turning to go to her bedroom, she kissed me lightly on the lips and repeated what she had said last night, or was it in the morning? "I'm yours, and you can use me as you please." I followed her into her bedroom, helped her undress, and then used her, which rarely happened with Melissa, who had everything in her hands. Actually, I have to fix it. I invited Melissa to the service, but she refused. Too busy. By a happy coincidence, both Roland and Judy were off duty on the day Jimmy was serving, so I hired them to guard. Hire turned out to be the wrong word because they both refused the compensation I was trying to pay them, even though I transferred twice that amount to the Boys and Girls Police Club on their behalf. The Walters Billy with his arm in a cast and Bobby with dark glasses due to the effects of a concussion behaved decently. In fact, Jean's short speech at the service was the most innocuous thing I've ever heard her say. The room was packed because almost everyone who knew Jimmy loved him. Things weren't going well for Charlene. In fact, she was on tenterhooks the whole time, muttering to herself, "I loved you so much, Jimmy." During the reception, Charlene came to her senses and was able to talk almost normally with all the well-wishers. Even the Walters were kind to her. I promised Jean I'd talk to her in a few days and show Jimmy's will, and she really thanked me and behaved like a normal person. When Charlene and I returned home from work, we collapsed into bed and then did what we had been doing for the last 4 days, at least twice a day. We made love. I stayed for 2 more days to make sure everything was okay. The last night before I left, Charlene became very serious. "Brad, I'm so ashamed that I seduced you into cheating on Melissa. It was only my overwhelming grief and selfishness that made me do this. Please don't think badly of me. I promise to leave you alone. However, it would be remiss of me not to tell you that I enjoyed every second of this process. I was more satisfied than I had ever been in my life, even with Jimmy. You've done a great job pretending to love me, and Jimmy was right when he said you'd take good care of me. Now I'll be strong and I won't cry anymore." I looked into her eyes for at least a full minute. Then I just said, "I wasn't pretending," and made love to her again. Then, in the middle of the night, I used her vigorously twice, once tying her hands to the bedposts. This was my fantasy, which Melissa, controlling herself, would never condescend to, and then in the morning, just before I left, I made love to her again. The look of gratitude, longing, and coquetry that she gave me when I left her door and turned to look at her was imprinted on my brain. While I was driving to the airport and then flying home, I had a real problem with guilt. I cheated, but more than that, I fell in love. Charlene's full and unconditional consent, her passion for love, and the fact that our genitals seemed to be made for each other led to the most pleasant, both emotionally and physically, contacts in my life. Besides, the desire to protect her that I felt towards her was the most pleasant feeling I've ever felt. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I felt I had to tell Melissa and let things take their course. I was a little annoyed that she couldn't meet me at the airport, but as it turned out, everything was fine, because on the way home by taxi and during the hour that I waited before she arrived, I was able to collect my thoughts. When Melissa returned home, she greeted me warmly, albeit a little hesitantly. I didn't like that first comment after our kiss. "Well, how's the little nerd doing?" I restrained myself from snapping at her, but she could see the anger burning in my eyes. "Charlene's not a wimp, she's just an addict who misses Jimmy terribly, and she's doing as well as you'd expect," I replied. "Oh, okay. I hope you were able to help her," Melissa replied, trying to make up for her tactless comment. I told Melissa about the service and some other details, but not that I had made love to Charlene almost 24 times. This will be discussed later. When there was a lull, I said, "Let's sit in the living room for a minute." I noticed the wariness in Melissa's eyes. I wasn't sure exactly why, because I didn't think my words sounded ominous. I decided to start by saying, "I learned something interesting during my visit." Then I wanted to tell her as gently and dispassionately as possible about how I enjoyed being a defender, about Charlene's dependence on me, and, ultimately, admit that I had sex with her love and see what Melissa and I will do next. As it turned out, my choice of opening words led to a completely different and unexpected conversation. After we sat down and I said slowly with a grimace on my face, "I learned something interesting during my visit." I didn't have a chance to say anything else before she excitedly blurted out, "What did someone tell you?" That's not true. Although I was stunned by this, for some reason my mind suddenly cleared up, and I'm sure it was helped by what was either a blank stare or a thoughtful expression on my face. After a pause of a few seconds, she continued nervously, "I didn't have sex with John Peters. Why would I even think that my loving wife would make love to John Peters while I attend a memorial service for my dead best friend?" I asked, and my question was full of sarcasm. Well, that jerk threatened to call you and tell you everything if I refused to make love to him. He even had your cell phone number," she blurted out, wringing her hands, which looked like they had alarmingly sweaty palms. "So the photos are lying?" I replied sarcastically. In one of the few moments during our entire relationship, Melissa seemed at a loss for words. She covered her face with her hands, and her breathing became shallow and noisy. When she opened her face, she blushed. "Look, I know a lot," I said sternly, although at that moment I had no idea about anything. I was just leading her along a path of primroses. "The only chance for you is to fully confess, and immediately." Uh, I, nothing. "Tell me," she muttered. "Okay, have it your way. As soon as I finish the laundry, I'll pack my things," I bluffed, getting up and heading out of the room. "No, no, no. Wait," she stammered, grabbing my hand. "Please sit down. I'll tell you the whole story." I sat down, and the irony of the situation in which I planned to tell her that I cheated on her, and now I'm probably going to hear that she did it, caused confusion in my brain. You must understand from the very beginning that I love you unconditionally. I know sometimes it feels like I put myself and my job first. Sometimes. I laughed to myself, but didn't say anything. I let her continue. "I really love you. I can't explain how it happened, but the day after you left, I went out with the guys from my office and drank too much. The next morning I woke up in John Peter's bed. I can't explain why I stayed with him the rest of the day and that night too. I think it's because you weren't there, and I thought that if I sinned once, then a couple more times won't change anything." Yes, she did say that, although I'm not the kind of person who likes to talk, am I? Then she continued, wringing her hands and looking like she was about to cry. "Anyway, on the second night, when I wanted to go home, he got angry and said he would call you and tell you that I was his cheater, and showed me your mobile number, which he must have taken from my phone while I was sleeping. At that moment, I told him to go to hell and left. I didn't think he would really tell you because he knows how big and strong you are," she said before covering her face again. I sat stunned. It was very difficult for me to digest this information. I certainly wasn't going to admit it now, but at the same time, I wasn't that much of a shit to punish her for what she'd done. After a minute's pause, when she begged, "Say something," I finally answered, "Was that the only time you cheated on me?" After a long pause and a worried expression on her face, she said yes. However, judging by the delay and the expression on her face, there was no doubt that the real answer was no. "I think we should get something to eat. Back at Charlie's if you want and get back to it tomorrow," I said, standing up and extending my hand to her. Her relief was obvious when she sighed and stood up, shivering. In fact, I think I noticed a single tear on her otherwise unflappable face. We both made every effort to behave normally during meals, and mostly succeeded in doing so. When we got home, Melissa turned out to be extremely amorous, so as soon as our food was digested, we went to bed. I tried to use her in a missionary position, but she, as usual, took the initiative and ended up on top. Although I could have overcome her, and dominated her, that was not my intention. I was trying to figure out if I could repeat the euphoria I felt with Charlene, with Melissa. After all, we had two very pleasant ones from a physical point of view before we fell asleep. However, the first one was almost hopeless emotionally, and the second one gave me about half as much emotional satisfaction as my lovemaking with Charlene. The next evening, Melissa was ready to continue our conversation, but I postponed it for several reasons. I needed clarity of mind before I could talk to her again. I had a real internal conflict about what I was going to do next. However, one thing was clear: I was going to make John Peters pay. Of course, it was at least partly hypocritical of me to want to beat the crap out of him. Of course, it was like a caveman on my part, and potentially risky. Of course, I should have been more optimistic about him, especially considering that it was his reaction to Melissa that forced her to confess. But we are what we are, and you can't grow up and do athletics, business, and love, like I did, and just forgive a misdemeanor like Peters. After making sure that the video system in my construction trailer would provide me with an alibi by showing the video from Tuesday as from Thursday, I received information about the schedule of the Peters Health Club, according to which he trained on Thursday at noon. After skipping lunch, I paid him a visit, completely changing my facial expression and clothes. Of course, I couldn't hide the fact that I was 190 centimeters and 105 kilograms, but I was sure that the video of my construction trailer would provide me with an alibi, even if he suspected that it was me. I took pity on him when he cowered, and only dislocated his right shoulder, not broke his arm at the elbow, which was my original plan. Recognition flashed in his eyes as I growled. You know what this is for, you whore. The cops never contacted me, but Melissa did on Friday night after work. At first, she tried to act carefree, but I could feel that everything was boiling inside her. Guess who came to work today with his right arm in a sling? She asked casually as we ate Chinese takeout. Taking a bite of the Kung Pao chicken, I replied just as casually, I have no idea. Who is it? John Peters, she retorted, trying to be cool again. Really? What happened to him? Did any husband of the woman he was making love to hurt him? I replied without looking into her eyes and immediately added, could you pass me some more fried rice with beef, please? Maybe, she giggled, handing over the rice, and her composure began to give way. Do you know what he told me? He swore that he didn't call you and didn't tell you about our bed contact. He swore he didn't have any photos, she continued as her composure began to weaken. I never said that he told me or that he had photographs, I replied. Then how did you know? She snapped. You told me, I replied, starting to really enjoy her anxiety. But you said you got some interesting information during your visit to your hometown for Jimmy's funeral. She spat out, throwing down her chopsticks. That's what I did. I found that I really enjoy protecting Charlene from those around her who were trying to cheat her. I was wondering if I could feel the same sense of security towards you. Your guilty conscience triggered your reaction, and as soon as I thought I understood what you were talking about, I played along. Good game on my part. Huh? I asked rhetorically with a smirk on my face that couldn't be suppressed. For only the second time since we met, Melissa burst into tears, turned over her plate, and ran out of the kitchen. I think there will be no lovemaking today. I chuckled to myself, finishing Kung Pao. It was really delicious. It was cold at home that weekend. I paid a visit to Tom, the owner of the construction company I worked for, and talked on the phone with Charlene for 2 hours. On Sunday evening, my plans were clear. I realized that Melissa loved me in some way, but in fact other things were much more important to her than me or our marriage. Besides, I realized that her ability to love was small, negligible compared to Charlene. I realized even more that Charlene probably already loved me more than Melissa, and that my relationship with Charlene could be strong for centuries. I sat Melissa down in the living room again. Melissa, I'm sorry to have to say this, because you have many wonderful qualities, but even before you confessed to cheating, I realized that I didn't love you as much as when we got married, when I should have loved you more. I realized that I don't feel the same love for you that Charlene felt for Jimmy. I realized that over time we would move away from each other, not together. I think if you're honest with yourself, you'll realize that your feelings reflect mine. I intend to file for divorce next week due to irreconcilable differences, and will try to settle everything as peacefully as possible. Melissa steadfastly paused. After a long pause, she giggled. Do you want me to beg you to stay married? No, I replied calmly. I want you to accept this and move on as quickly as possible. I don't dislike you, and I'm not going to divorce you because of your affair with John Peters. Her next question was unexpected. Can we still live together and make love until the divorce is final? We can wait a month. By the time the project I am in charge of is completed, I will leave this area and go 1,000 kilometers away. It seemed to take her by surprise. Aren't you going back to your hometown? No, there's nothing waiting for me there. I'm moving to the southeast, and I'm looking for a supervisor job first. This statement was true, but only because Charlene also moved there. Perhaps the most surprising thing was that my bed life with Melissa was as good as it had been before I moved in. We parted as peacefully as possible. Of course, it helped me a lot that she earned more money than I did. So I didn't pay her alimony, and I didn't ask for it, and that I sold her my share of our house for an amount that was probably only 2/3 of what she was really worth. To be honest, I think I did it to calm my conscience for not confessing to her about my infidelity. I actually got this job in the southeast, and there was even a small salary increase associated with it. Charlene moved in with me. Charlene worked at a bank in our new neighborhood until I filed for divorce and we got married. About a month after our honeymoon, we started seriously conceiving children, and she quit her job for good when she was 7 months pregnant. Now, 6 years later, we have 3 children, and I have more love, more self-esteem. Sometimes I feel guilty that the death of my best friend has become the epitome of eternal happiness for me. But then I remember what Charlene told me on the first day when I came to her house after Jimmy's death. Jimmy said you'd take good care of me. And